Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. This is Cari and my co-host Brad. You've joined us for our Cars and Coffee with Kenny Brown, and we're happy to have you here. And happy Father's Day weekend for all those fathers out there. We really appreciate you being here this weekend. We have an extra special guest, and typically, what Brad and I are trying to do is play a video from Kenny teaching us some tech. But Wes has so much to share with us today. We're going to eliminate that for today, but we'll carry forward with it next week. So what we're going to do here is we'll introduce Mr. Duenkel on our screen. Hey, Wes.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well.
Good.
I've got my coffee cup here.
That's
aspirational. I don't have one yet.
That's great. So what we're going to do is, Wes, why don't you give us a little background on yourself? Tell us a little bit about where you started in the automotive industry.
Sure. Actually, that's a really good question. Actually, if we want to, we can. I kind of go into that a little bit on my slideshow. So if we can, I'm joining you from my happy place, the garage. But yeah, if we want to just go ahead and I can share my screen and we can go through the slideshow and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Okay. I have visuals to go along with me yapping. So
okay,
yeah, but hopefully, good. And also we'll answer some questions as well, because I'm sure you probably have a lot of questions as we go through, and I love to share what I've learned and what mistakes I've made and how I've corrected those.
So anyway, Wes is going to be, he is the author of, there's a shadow on here, How to Build and Modify. There. I'll let you hold it, Wes. I'll move the screen to you.
Okay. We'll talk about this book too.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we'll talk about this book as well. So.
Yeah, Wes is first going to share some tech information, a little bit about him, and then we'll open for a Q&A, and we'll go from there. So Wes, why don't you take it away? Share your screen.
Will do. Okay. Elevator music should be playing at the moment.
Well, hello, Fred. Fred was here yesterday, Fred Francher, and he picked up his car. He had a full Kenny Brown suspension done on his Shelby GT, and he's happy with that. Joe Johnson, good to see you. Joe, I hear you were in a little contusion with your truck and didn't get to the track. I'm so sorry about that. Brian West, good to see that you're here. And I forgot your name from Niagara. You're on every week, but you are always there. Thank you. For some reason, your name's not showing up on our screen. So Bob Jones, good to see you there. And we have, I think it's Rory from Maple Ridge, British Columbia. So welcome, everybody. Wes, if you're ready to share your screen, I will share it, and we'll get on with the presentation. Again, if you're just joining in, this is Wes Duenkel, and he is going to share a little bit about how to build and modify your S197, specifically the 11 to 14s. Here you go, Wes.
Great. So is the screen being shared at the moment?
Yes, it is.
Great. So yeah, there's like I said, my name's Wes Duenkel. Currently I'm a professional photographer. I guess you could say I'm a book author because I wrote a book now. But I am for sure a Mustang nerd. So just a little bit about the photography side. These are 4.4 GTs at Sebring 2019, I believe. There's one of the things, I do some work for Ford, and a lot of times it's we're going to have all these cars together. They let me know maybe a day or two in advance, and they say you got 15 minutes to get it done. So because race weekends are really busy, so it's one of those you do what you can in the time frame that you have, and it's kind of one of those things where it's 80% preparation, 20% luck, maybe vice versa. But anyway, so this is an example. Somebody took this photo, I guess, from the media center across the way of this photo shoot going on, and then it was on social media. I thought, well, I need to save that. But then this photo is the final result. Use some flashes and stuff like that. But anyway, on this slide, also besides 4 beautiful Ford GTs, is my contact information. So you might want to take a screenshot or get your phone out, take a picture of that stuff if you want to contact me. Email address there is wes@wesduenkel.com. My website, which also has copies of the book, shameless plug. And then also I have a YouTube channel called Fix Body Mustangs. That's not a typo, because I'm always fixing on them It's a fixed body Mustang, not a Fox body. So quite a few videos on that YouTube, including a lot of Kenny Brown stuff, because have had the pleasure of installing a lot of Kenny Brown things over the years, and have been more and more impressed with the quality and fitment and performance of those products as the years go on, and they keep getting better and better. So so a little bit about me. I'm always wrenching on stuff. My Mustangs are in my garage in various states of undress all the time, so that's pretty typical. But this is 1995. I wanted a car. I wasn't looking for a Mustang, but I graduated high school and I wanted a car with a V8, preferably a manual transmission. Well, just about a mile from my house, a guy was selling this '85 Mustang for $1,500, and it was probably not worth that. But I learned a lot from this car. And one thing you can look at is, at the time, look at it. This car was only 10 years old. This is 1995, and look at how rough that car is, rust and everything. So cars of quality, rust-wise and corrosion protection and everything, have come a long way. Now, this car was wrecked probably a couple times before I bought it, so that doesn't help. But the rust issues, that kind of stuff, only 10 years old. I mean, that's something. So anyway, that's what Midwestern winters will do to a car, though. This is kind of typical then. Always had the car apart. Here we're donating the transmission to another car. Always working in the garage. If I had a garage, great, but I mean, driveway, whatever, because you got to do what you got to do. And then I bought this one shortly thereafter, actually from the same guy, but this is another '85. And this one kind of became my partner in crime when I was in college, and really launched my interest in working on Mustangs and working on cars in general. My dad didn't really do it. I mean, he tinkered a little bit. He'd change his own oil, do little things like that. But I basically learned by doing on the car mechanic side. I mean, I just learned by making mistakes and figuring it out, and watching what other people do. And at the time, 1995, 96, 97, the internet had just started, and so that was a great place for me to find a lot of information and find a community of people to do it. Look, there's a theme here: cars in pieces and out in the open. But here, I guess I'm taking the K member and stuff, and I was going to put it in a different car. You could see my high-tech engine support device there, a 4x4 with some chains, which does work quite well. That one donated suspension to this one, which is a car I got for free. Probably that was too much as well. But this is a '83 Mustang Coupe that I got. It was a V6 automatic car that somebody gave to me and said, "Here, you need a Fox." And so I thought, okay, well, I need another one, and I wanted to build one. So what I ended up doing is building it into that, which was, at the time, I had a full-time job. I wasn't real crazy about the full-time job, but I thought, I really want to build cars. At the time, I wanted to build cars for a living, race prep cars, build cars and stuff. So I thought, I really want to do this. And so this became, was going to be my rolling business card for that endeavor. Carbon fiber front fenders had made, exhaust through the body, all kinds of fun stuff. But it was, I wanted to have a gutted, road legal track car. And so that's what I built it into. I did everything myself except for the paint and the body. This kind of, at the time though, by the time the car was finished, which took me several years to finish it, I started to get into photography. And so that kind of derailed that plan. But here's another Fox that I've had recently, changing the heater core. There's another trend here. It's out in the driveway working on it. So we went and this is a S197 that I did most recently. This is the one for the book, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But this is kind of showing a lot of my photography work here too. This is a 03 Cobra that I currently have as well. This is my desert island car. If I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't buy a Ferrari, wouldn't buy Ford GT. I'd have this car. This is my car. And then recently I picked up an '86 Celine, which Kenny has had obviously a lot of history in, developing these cars and making them into what they were for Celine in 1987 and beyond. So 86s had drum brakes and, not a lot of the suspension and handling parts that the later models did because of things they learned racing, racing these cars in particular, and addressing the shortcomings for racing them. When I was in college, I went to college though more for actually an art degree. I wanted to be an industrial designer where it's just like product design. But of course I had a passion for cars and I was constantly drawing cars and I had always ideas about cars. So that basically I quickly realized that I was more interested in working on my car than actually sipping coffee and thinking about design. So here we're just doing a water pump replacement at a buddy's place at college. And I went to University of Wisconsin Stout, which is a state school about an hour into Wisconsin from Minnesota. So like from the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, about an hour east. So we have bad winters, and when you have weather that's conducive enough to drink beer and change a water pump, you do it and you enjoy it. But I kind of always I was always particular, especially about sound. And so here I'm actually recording different muffler combinations that I had on that car. And this is probably over winter break, probably in January sometime in Wisconsin. So not the most hospitable situation, but it worked. This is something I kind of designed as a senior project, were some control arms that had an adjustable sway bar mount. A lot of it was just figuring it out as far as where even to find materials. I think I even used tubing that was exhaust tubing for the bushing, the bushing sleeves, which would not be advisable. But I didn't know at the time. I didn't know there was such a thing as metal supply places. I just took what I could find. But eventually learned how to do it differently. So this is, some of you may recognize this place. So this is kind of brings us to the family here as well. But in 1999, I wanted to do an internship, and I was going to school. And usually, you kind of do an internship. You try to do an internship during the summer, especially when you're closing in on graduation. So I went through a Muscle Mustangs magazine, flipped through the whole thing, and sent emails and letters to all the advertisers in the magazines, because that's where I wanted to do an internship. I didn't want to do an internship, at the placement office at school, because they were boring places. They were places that made, it's Wisconsin, so there's a lot of food processing stuff or injection molding and cheese making. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I wanted to work on cars. I wanted to learn how to do it. So HP Motorsport was one of the only places, like one of two, I think. I sent probably 30 emails and 40 emails, proposals to people, and they were one of the only people that called me back, and they said, yeah, we'd like to have you come out. I thought, great, let's do it. I remember at the time it was, I thought it was a lot of money at the time. It was like $450 a week to pay me. I thought, some internships aren't paid, so this sounds great. This is where I met Paul Brown, Kenny's son. And Paul was a diehard workaholic, and I think it kind of runs in the family. But he was either on the phone. He was on the phone all day talking to customers at HP Motorsport. At night, he'd be working on the race car. And since I was in college and I was in Omaha, Nebraska with them for a summer, I really had nothing else to do, which suited Paul just fine, because that meant that we could work on stuff into the evening all the time, including this. This is a car that we put together. It's a wide body Celine. It was based on, actually the chassis is like a pre-production Mustang from Ford. It was called, I think they didn't have VINs for them, and this one was called Muffin. So that's why this race car was named Muffin. But this is a car that we built in the summer of 1999 and for World Challenge. And here's me with that car. So a lot of times, you do what you can to get it done. So here's Paul and Kenny actually in 2009 for Mustang Challenge. Now, by 2009, 10 years later, I had kids, family, started doing racing photography professionally. And so I met Kenny while doing, I was the series photographer for the Mustang Challenge in 2009 and 2010. And so I met Kenny there. Obviously, I knew Paul for many years, and we were good friends and hung out together. But I hadn't really known Kenny that much, but I got to know him through his work with the Mustang Challenge. And it was definitely a lot of the same traits, being, he was a constant learner, which I appreciate, because I loved school. I really did like school. I liked learning. I didn't necessarily like learning at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning, but I liked learning new things. And Kenny had kind of that passion as well. Obviously sharing information of what he learned. He with his cars and coffees. I really appreciated those, and over the past couple of years, just sharing what you learn and being humble about it is all name of the game. So, this is some Mustang Challenge stuff I did. Was the photographer for Mustang Challenge. Here's one of the Speedworks cars that Kenny engineered. I believe that looks like Paul driving. I think he drove the 44 car. So Paul, just real quick, Paul drove one of the Mustang Challenge cars at Barber. I'm not exactly sure. They might have had an open seat. I'm not sure how the situation all worked out, but there was an availability, and Paul and Ken were working together a little bit at that time. So, Paul came out and drove the Mustang Challenge car. It was kind of interesting up to that point. Not to get in the weeds, but one of the things that surprised Paul about the Mustang Challenge car was that he thought, setup wasn't all that big of a deal. He'll just drive around anything. And he realized that the Mustang Challenge car was actually very sensitive to setup. And if it wasn't set up right, you were going to be slow, no matter how hard you drove it or how much you tried to drive around any issues. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a humbling experience for Paul when he learned, that look, I mean, my driving ability will only take me so far. Car setup actually matters. And so that's where Kenny and Paul actually worked on some setups during the race. Cause I think there was something that happened during the race, and Paul was kind of hanging around the back. He's like, what am I doing? Why don't we just set up the car and try some different setups? And the setups that they actually developed, I believe during that race actually were kind of the baselines that they used for the rest of the season. So the Mustang Challenge work that I did, I met Mickey Mattis from Ford, and he really liked my work. And so fortunately that turned into other work with Ford, including Daytona prototypes. They started to do the Daytona prototype as a way to prove out the engine for the Ford GT. So I got to do work actually for Ford during that Daytona prototype era, which was really, really good. And then there's Joey Hand at Daytona. I think they won that year. But that work, maybe it's the 02 car that won that year. Okay. Yeah, that's Tony Kanaan driving there as well. So they use those photos for posters and things like that. But that work, the Daytona prototype work, obviously turned into the Ford GT. And that was a really neat project to work on as well. Got to do it from, the first time that Ganassi pulled a car out of the trailer at Daytona right after Petit Le Mans in November of I guess that'd be 2015. So anyway, got to do the Ford GT stuff in IMSA. So that was cool. A colleague of mine, Bob Chapman, and I did all that work for Ford through those 4 years of the program, 2016 to 2019. And that work, of course, leads to other cool work that I get to do for Ford, including the new next gen, NASCAR. Got to do that. And now the Ford GT, the Mustang GT4 is a great project that I get to do some work with Ford on as well, but especially with the teams. This is PF Racing, and this was from Daytona this year, where they had three Mustangs that they were running. And then ENCORE had a couple. Anyway, but Mustang GT4, that's a nice piece of kit. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute if you have any GT4 questions, because I just did a deep technical dive for those. That's going to be out in Mustang Home Magazine. But let's talk about the book. So this is turned out, this publisher reached out to me, and I did a lot of technical work, technical writing and stuff for different magazines over the years as well. And they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to write a book on S197 Mustangs? And I thought, sure, I'll try that out. That was in January of 2020, which turned out to be a good project to work on for the year of 2020. Kept me busy. So this is a book about 2011 to 14 Mustangs and modifying those. The information in the book, though, however, still applies toward basically 2005 to 2014, the suspension stuff, chassis stuff, all that. The only reason it's 2011 to 14 is because the Coyote engine is specific in those cars, and all the engine stuff is just obviously for Coyotes. So how can I get one? Operators are standing by, but you can get an autographed copy at my website or on the Kenny Brown website, or you can just get a copy, that doesn't have an autograph from Amazon or your favorite bookstore. So I think Barnes & Noble will either have them or order them. but you can do it that way as well. But the book really centers around 2014. Well, this is a 2012 Mustang that I bought, but it was completely stock. These cars are actually in a good place right now, value-wise. I mean, you can get one mid-teens. This one I bought for 17, but you can get one for mid-teens, a good car, no accident, that kind of stuff. The early 3-valve, 4.6 liter 3-valve powered cars are probably $5,000 cheaper. You can get those around 10. A good one around 10 to 12, so all those, an S197 is a really, really nice project car. They're easy to work on. They are, everything is, all the hose connections are click hose connections. I mean, there's no hose clamps to monkey with. They're really nice. All the fasteners have little flags on the back. So if you are taking a nut off or a bolt off, you won't have to hold the other side with a wrench. It's got a flag on it. I mean, it's really easy. They made it easy to assemble. And of course, it makes it easy to disassemble. So this car had ended up with an Edelbrock supercharger that we did for the book. Can't remember exactly how much power it made up. I think I have a dynograph in here, but we put a Tremec Magnum transmission in it, bunch of other stuff. But yeah, so this is where we started, where we ended. So this is on a Mustang dyno, but we started at 339 horsepower to the wheels, and then ended up with 537 at the wheels. And that's with the stage 1, the stage 2 Edelbrock kit on it. So really good power though. I mean, these cars are responsive for modifications. It's not like the old, push rod days where you're going to pick up big gains by putting on an air filter or anything like that. I mean, they're incremental, but they are significant. So over time, you can make, by adding a bunch of different things, you can make good power. Yeah, we had so headers are helpful. There's the Magnum transmission, really good. Suspension stuff, Kenny Brown stuff. I put that in the rear grip kit, and I have to say, and I mean, this is not a plug. I mean, this is serious. It fit perfectly. I was extremely impressed with how well. Usually you're thinking, holes don't line up. I mean, working on Fox bodies and SN95s, stuff's not really going to line up anyway. But I mean, usually the holes are, you kind of have to wiggle a bolt to get it in. This stuff just bolted in like it was factory stuff. All the bolt holes lined up. I mean, it was super nice. And another thing I learned that was really interesting, spherical rod ends, you think they're going to be a little noisy or something like that. Not rattly, but transmit a little bit of noise into the cabin. I could not tell the difference between the rubber bushings and this from an NVH standpoint. So, one thing to think about is it's easy to make a car fast. It's hard to make a car better. So this kind of stuff, maybe I'll back up here, but if this suspension stuff, sure, it makes it faster, but it makes the car better. And you're not going to have NVH penalties, any of that stuff. I mean, it was phenomenal. I was really impressed with it. So braking wise too, put GT500 brakes on it. These brakes are also really incredible. So had a Kenny Brown brake ducts on there as well, and also the Street and Performance coilovers actually came from H&R, and that was a really nice setup as well. Spring rates seemed really good for road driving, and it made the car obviously a lot more responsive. And you can adjust the ride height as well, which is nice, and it bolted in just like stock. So in the book, we kind of talk about a lot of things, and I try to cover a lot of theory. Not only what to do, but why it works. So here we talk about things, basic stuff like tire temperatures and how alignment affects tire temperatures. Tires are a huge, obviously, huge performance factor. So I mean, having a good 200 tread wear tire is going to make the car feel and perform a whole lot different. We talk about, suspension stuff. So not only, what, but why. I mean, weight transfer, springs and shocks and all that stuff, and how the center of gravity relates to weight transfer, and how spring rates relate to weight transfer. So I have, some different spring options in here listed, damper rates and how dampers affect an even damper construction. Monotubes versus twin tubes, what's the difference and why? Sway bars. So, that's another thing that's a big tuning tool. And then suspension geometry. So, roll centers and how they affect ride and handling. And instance center for anti-dive and anti-squat geometry as well. And so all that stuff actually, incidentally, is adjusted and tweaked with Kenny's geometry. So that's it's all related. So that's where we kind of talk about that here. And this one even has some information about the new K-Link, which is a really phenomenal suspension design, revolutionary as far as adapting that type of linkage to an S197 Mustang, and it is a complete bolt-in, which is extremely impressive. But we also cover other stuff, Watts Link or Panhard bar as well, and what's the difference between them and why one may be desirable, or for what you're doing versus others, and why the design, the drawbacks and advantages of each design. More suspension stuff. So especially with the rear grip kit, and then also big thing that was that we did was the Magnum transmission. So the MT82 transmission in this in the S197 Mustangs has a bad rap, mostly because of the shifter design, not necessarily because the transmission's weak. I mean, it's not the strongest thing around, but it's mostly just the shifter design, where it's attached partly to the transmission and partly to the body. And then when the engine's under load, the engine moves around because it's on a rubber mounts, which is a good thing, but it moves around. And so when it moves around, but the shifter is partly attached to the body that's not moving, then you get missed shifts and things like that. Anyway, one way to fix all that in one fell swoop is with a Magnum transmission. And one thing also we talk about is gear ratio spread. So I have some sawtooth diagrams on the right-hand side that talk about gear ratios. And one of my other complaints about the MT82 was that when you're driving around in fourth gear, if you're driving around in fifth gear, which is 1-to-1, sixth gear is the only overdrive. And it's a big RPM drop when you go from fifth, which is 1-to-1, to sixth. And with 373 gears, which is what the car that I had came with factory. It had a factory 373 gear car, and I'd be driving around, and I kind of felt myself, around 40 miles an hour, 45. You're constantly you're hunting between fifth and sixth, but sixth was too tall and fifth was too short. So the Magnum transmission has a much more drivable gear ratio spread. You can see with the sawtooth diagrams there on the right. Fourth is 1-to-1, and fifth and sixth are both overdrive. So that RPM drop is split between fifth and sixth, which I liked a lot better. Getting into the weeds there, I guess. But also talked about the details of making a Magnum fit in an S197, which a lot of people people think it's just a bolt-in, but it's kind of not, to get it to work as far as with the speed sensor, but also the reverse lockout. But you can with a module you can get from Modern Driveline. I think Bowler makes it as well. And I'd show to actually how to hook it up. And also there's some tuning things that you need to do in the tune, because to get cruise control to work properly as well, you have to actually tell the PCM what the gear ratios are, and they're going to be different than the MT82. So we talk about that as well. Obviously a lot of how-to stuff, how to put in headers, and I even talk about what extensions and tools you need to reach some of the tricky bolts, especially the starter. I love Ford, but the way they mount the starter to the bell housing is frustrating in every single Mustang. Foxes, SN95s, S197s with Coyotes. I'm not sure. I don't know why they mount the starter that way with the bolts that are hard to reach. They should be watching what GM and Chrysler does, and I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't know what that reason is, and it's frustrating. Anyway, tuning-wise, too, we talk about that in the book. Use HP Tuner software, which I think you had Tony the Tuner on Cars and Coffee at least once. HP Tuner software is really nice software. It's pretty intuitive. You have to kind of know some things, but cover that in the book. And there's some specific things that you can do that are pretty straightforward. Just if you're patient and use a little bit of logic. And I cover things like a really common thing would be like putting on mass airflow sensor tuning. So if you put on a larger tube, but you stick the sensor in there, the mass airflow sensor is going to need to be retuned if it's beyond a certain diameter window. And so, but you can tune your mass airflow sensor using the HP Tuner software and the procedure I outline in the book. Cooling, we did a big cooling upgrade for this Mustang. It was not, later track pack cars had oil coolers. This one did not. Track pack didn't, I guess, exist in 2012. This, we upgrade the cooling on it. Supercharger, install the supercharger, show step-by-step on how to do all that. Here's some more tuning stuff with HP Tuner software. We put on a Cobra Jet intake. We did a naturally aspirated combination of Cobra Jet intake and twin 65 millimeter, or is it 62 millimeter throttle body? I can't remember offhand. But anyway, that was actually a really good combination, more than 400 wheel horsepower, depending on the dyno that you're on. So that's also a really good combination. We talk about all that and how to tune that, what's required. Obviously, it helps if you have someone to kind of do a little bit of road drivability tuning, let's just say. It helps to have somebody to hold the computer like a kid. Just make sure they wear their seatbelt. So that's pretty much the book. I mean, did all the stuff for the book myself. Mostly solo, except for lifting the supercharger. I had my neighbor come over and help me put the supercharger on the motor, but all of it I did by myself in my driveway or in my garage on jack stands. And you can do all of that with these cars. And so super impressed with the S197 Mustang, easy to work on. And with just a little bit of tools and patience, and if you pay attention, you can do all this work yourself. Kenny Brown suspension stuff goes on pretty easy in an afternoon. Even the front, changing the front cross member and the K member stuff, because there's no power steering hydraulic lines to work with. It's actually, the job is a pleasure. And the cars, I mean, as long as you, well, modern corrosion protection means that you don't necessarily have to, you're not going to be worrying about rusty, crusty spindles or fasteners and all that kind of stuff. That's usually pretty, they've kind of got that figured out. So wanted to just kind of touch on a few photography things real quick before we open up to questions. So yeah, obviously everybody loves Ford GT stuff. This is just, guys working on the Ford GT, which is cool. We did testing at several different places, and they were just trying to figure out the car at the time. This is a Homestead Speedway. So working on cars that just kind of some cool. I think the Ford GT will be a highlight of my photography career as far as being able to do this for Ford. It was a privilege and a pleasure to work with all these people. They were, everyone was pulling in the same direction. Ganassi does an excellent job of hiring good people and having the right people and letting them do their jobs. And Ford's marketing people had that same kind of philosophy with Bob Chapman and I. I mean, it was basically, we very rarely had anything that it was just like, show up and do your thing, which I greatly appreciate that. Oh, this is interesting. Winning at Le Mans. So this is 1966, and this is the big glass house back in 1966, a photo of that. And after Ford won Le Mans, which unfortunately I didn't get to go, that was a different group of marketing people that got to go, including photographers. But regardless, when they came back, they wanted to do something similar. So they said, we're going to block off the windows in the glass house to say a similar message, but we want to have a good photo of it. So no pressure, something which is kind of historic you're going to have to do, and don't screw it up. So this is what we came up with. They did the windows, and then went out there at night and took a photo of it. And actually, a friend of mine showed up to kind of watch the process, and he had a Bullet Mustang, S197 Bullet Mustang, and he drove into the parking lot. I thought, yeah, why don't you do that again? And I'm going to capture the taillights with the camera. So that's kind of what that added a little bit of a visual element there. But yeah, Ford GT stuff is by far going to be the highlight of what I got to do from a photography standpoint, I think. Really cool stuff. There's Scott Dixon at Sebring, and road car stuff. We went to Utah. Really cool stuff there. Went to the mountains. Just the scenery there was beautiful. I was there for like a week and a half while the media drove the cars, and Joey Hand was there to give people rides and talk to them. And it was a really, really great program. There's Henry Ford III. Actually, he was at Le Mans in 1966, but he was a young lad at the time. His dad was a young lad at the time. I'm sorry. Edsel, his dad was at Le Mans in 1966, so he was about probably his age. Kind of interesting. But yeah, we went to the mountains and did some cool stuff for 4GT production stuff. And that's kind of cool. Got to do that. We'll open it up for questions, and if you guys have any questions about anything, then we can kind of share some stories as well. If you guys have any questions at all, I guess, Cari, you want to see how you want to bring those in?
Okay, you're finished with your, because I'll take your screenshot down.
Oh, sure, that's fine. Yep, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, in fact, maybe. Well, and I was thinking it's kind of sharing. I was thinking maybe of sharing some stories as well. Do you want to share some stories, or maybe we probably should address a few questions before I go on to some of the
But do you
Paul
want
Brown's Adventures.
Yeah, are you finished with your presentation, or you have more? Because I know people are enjoying
Sure.
these. Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll resume it in a minute. So,
Okay. Okay,
so
cool.
I think I'm done sharing. Does that work?
That works. Well, thank you, Wes. That was very, very informative. We appreciate that.
Sure.
And people have some questions, I'm sure. As you can tell, Wes is an incredible photographer, great tech writer. Many of you have probably, if you were around when the magazines were around, you probably saw a lot of Wes's technical articles that he's written. Obviously, he's well versed on cars. We are using him a lot in our business for different things. So we're good friends with him, and he's just a great guy. Everything he touches, he puts his heart and soul into, and it's just very positive and comes out well. So we do have a discount I wanted to announce on the on Wes's book. If you purchase it through the Kenny Brown website, everybody that is viewing the Cars and Coffee right now will get we be able to purchase it for $29.95. So make sure you click on one of the links that we're sharing and put in the discount code CNC Book. Again, that's CNC Book on the Kenny Brown website, and you'll get it a little cheaper. And the big point is it's going to be autographed. So Wes is going to autograph each one of them personally. So make sure you take advantage of that offer. Let's see. We're going to go to some questions now. And Wes, I'm going to pull you up in just a minute on the screen. I'm going to get you one of these questions. One of them I want to answer because it's on the SLA before, Wes, you start into it. So Tony, yes, did you guys ever put an SLA front end in the S197? Interesting that you may ask, because Kenny has it developed. It's not all the way, but close enough where we can finish it off. So that is in the development plans. We just spoke about that this past week, sort of the plan to get that out. So yes, it's not on the market yet, but it will be shortly. Another thing I want to announce before Wes joins is we are going to be having a K-Link workshop coming up in July. I believe it's July 21st. It's a Thursday night. So we'll be sending out more information if you're on the Speed Therapy Society Facebook page, or if you get our newsletter, you will receive information on that. I'm sure we'll be advertising on the Kenny Brown Performance Facebook page as well. So make sure you look out for that. It was great. It's going to be a replay from Kenny introducing it, kind of a private introduction about 7 or 8 months ago before it was patented. We expect the patent to be here any day. I feel bad that the patent wasn't issued when he was here, but it's any day now. So it's gotten through the majority of the patent process with no issues. So we're really looking forward to that. If people don't know what the K-Link is, I'm going to have Wes tell us a little bit about it, because he's installed it, and he actually wrote the instructions for it, the install video, and took photography of us for us. So that's kind of how we're working with Wes. So he'll be able to tell you a little bit about what it does. And it's just a phenomenal product. It's a market disruptor product. We feel like first there was a Panhard bar, then there's the Watts Link, and now there's the K-Link. It's for any live axle car. So Wes will probably go into a little bit of it in a little bit. So Wes, I'm going to put you back on the screen here, and then we will share. You can share. We'll answer some questions. Brad, do you want me to read the questions, or would you like to?
You can read the questions if you want. We had quite a few comments, and we have quite a few people who are joining us. So I didn't know if you wanted to give everybody a shout out or not. I just have a couple things at the end, and that's it.
Okay, so cool. So let me find the first question, Wes. This is where it takes a little bit because I have to look here. Joe Johnson has a comment. He says, oh my, what a great amount of information. I must have that book. And Joe, again, I'm going to give you guys, this is perfect opportunity for me to give you the discount code to purchase on kennybrown.com. It is book, or CNC Book. So Cars and Coffee Book is what CNC stands for, CNC Book. And Wes will autograph it, and you'll get it for $29.95, which is a great price. The next one, Cliff Glidden, he was just saying hello to somebody, but Cliff, did you notice you're a number 44 car? in there. We may have to get that photo from Wes for you. Wes, number 44 was purchased by Cliff Glidden, and he is doing a lot of track events with it. He actually brought it here, and we did a lot of work on it. So I'm sure it was fun for me to see it, and I'm sure, Cliff, you got a kick out of it as well. And then Tony has one question is, this is for you, Wes. Any IRS setup info in your book?
No, so I don't have, because the S197 Mustang is a solid axle, I don't really discuss IRS stuff in that in the book. There's obviously advantages to an IRS, but the way that the solid axle is on the S187, it's a lot more confidence inspiring to drive than earlier solid axle. So like a Fox body or like SN95, the earlier solid axles, you kind of hit bumps and it would move around and wiggle around because there's a lot of rubber back there. And also it's located, it's asking a lot of the forelinks to do several different jobs. And so when Ford, they had obviously an opportunity to do a clean sheet design on the S197. And I think based on customer feedback, a lot of times too, a lot of customers are like, hey, because the IRS in the 1999 to 2004 Cobras was kind of compromised, Ford had to meet a lot of different requirements to make that work. So they made a lot of compromises. And those compromises can be addressed, by the way. But for out of the box, a lot of people didn't really like the IRS there. And so it kind of had I want to say a less than favorable reputation. So with S187, they went with a solid axle. It was a tried and true kind of thing, but it's a 3-link with a pattern bar, which is a proper design. And so that's why there's just a little bit, if you replace rubber bushings with spherical rod ends, change some of the geometry a little bit, it's a phenomenal suspension. So to answer your question, then I don't cover IRS in this book particularly because these cars don't have IRS, but and honestly, with say example like with the K-Link, because the roll center moves down is lower than it can be with any other kind of pattern bar or a Watts link, you can get really very similar to IRS performance out of the solid axle. The only thing that a solid axle doesn't have that IRS does have is camber gain under compression. But because the solid axle is always on the ground, there's the camber is always going to be 0 versus positive, which would be, with the wheels leaning out, that's a problem too. So, but anyway, that's a long roundabout way to say that I don't cover IRS stuff in the book, but that's just because the S187s don't have an IRS. But maybe we need to do a 1999 and up Cobra book that, or things that talk about IRS in there, because actually, Kenny Brown actually has some really nice IRS products, and they're kind of unique in the market in that way that they really have a lot of, with the cradle geometry that's modified. That's one. Control arms, upper and lower control arms are also a big advantage as well. So you can really take that suspension and take it quite a long way. And in general, in an SN95 or Fox, from a solid axle to an IRS, back-to-back comparison, an IRS just has an inherent advantage in theory, and you can bear that out with proper parts as well. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and so we have another one, and Michael, I'm going to really butcher your last name. I'll say Michael R. And you might know him, Wes, because I think he came from your promotion of this workshop.
How do you spell the last name?
Rysleki.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I put your names anyway. So anyway, he's from London, England.
Oh, great.
So which is really cool. So he's not watching it in the morning; he's watching it in the afternoon, which is great. Anyway, his question is: how does the performance of a fully modified S197's rear end, as in your book, compare to an IRS in the S550 and GT4?
Oh, really good question. So, I think some Ford engineers would probably, the Ford performance engineers would probably have a better way to answer that. But put it this way, the IRS in the S550 is actually pretty good. If you look at, if we look at it also this way, in the GT4, there's people Dean Martin is a guy who they were Rehagen Racing for a while, and then he now does Core Motorsports. But he has experience driving and campaigning both the S197 cars, which were the FR500s, also Mustang Challenge cars, but and then the new GT4. And the GT4 is way faster. Now, is it because of the suspension design? No, there's a lot of other things at play. Tires, for one, the Michelin tires are really, really good. But also the Mustang GT4 is a $225,000 or $250,000 car. I can't remember offhand. But the FR500 was a lot less. It was more road car than it was race car. Where the Mustang GT4 is very much race car. But then again, engine power wise, they're probably roughly about the same. So the S550, they actually have, which I'll actually, if you have, you should subscribe to Mustang Hub magazine, because they actually are going to have a really deep technical dive. I'd crawl all over the car, take photos of everything, which is something that really I think the car deserved it. But they have some pretty trick stuff on there. But ultimately, as far as I can tell, their only modifications, generally speaking, are spherical bearings instead of rubber bushings. They have a different lower control arm, but I don't think there's really any geometry changes. It's more of just a strength issue because of the coilover spring rates and damper rates that they run on those cars. But really, the magic is in the dampers. But other than that, they don't really, I don't think they change pickup points. I really don't think they change a whole lot in the rear suspension. So the rear suspension on the S550 is actually very, very good. That being said, I bet you a car with a K-Link, apples to apples comparison, a car with a K-Link S197 with the same tires is going to give an S550 a run for its money, because the front suspension is also really good on the S187 and S550. They're pretty much variations of the two. They both use struts. They both have good lower control arm geometry. S550s have a dual ball joint knuckle, which is a little bit different. But I will say, it's just that the Mustang GT4 is just a way faster car because it's just so much more capable. Gearbox and all that kind of stuff. Brakes are a lot bigger and better. Weight-wise, are pretty similar. So I don't know. I guess the question is, with a track car or whatever, it's kind of what you like. If you're going to build a cheaper, you're going to spend less money with an S197 than you will with S550. But then again, in England, S197 isn't available. S550 is the card. So if you have an S550, there's some really good stuff you can do there. Most of it's just in springs and dampers, and just put as much tire under the car that you can fit, especially in the front. It's a front heavy car. So if you can, probably best to run some kind of square setup, just to get the balance right. Of course, having a staggered setup looks cool, but really you need to get as much front grip as you can, and you're going to do that with the most amount of rubber you can fit on the front. And so that's probably the best way to improve that car. Hope that answers your question, kind of. Oh, and I guess you asked about an IR. Oh, the IRS was the S550. Yeah. So Ford went to an IRS at the S550 for a reason. They wanted the car to be competitive globally from a marketing standpoint, and a stick axle car is not really going to do it in places other than the United States. People don't get it, so they're gonna, they want IRS, and the IRS is it's a better riding suspension. I have to say, I had the S197 for this book for a long time, and it was light years ahead of older cars. But the new current chassis is better yet. I mean, from a noise and vibration standpoint, from a handling standpoint, it feels like the S187 feels, I don't want to say truck-like, but it feels like you're just kind of in the car, where an S550, it's a sports car. Both great cars, but the S550 is it's a bit smaller feeling. It's just more of a GT car than the earlier chassis, like on the S197 is more of a muscle car, and the new one is definitely a sports car. So hope that answers the questions.
So before I ask the next question, I want you to talk a little bit more about Mustang Hub, because it's an incredible magazine, and I don't think it gets the appreciation that it needs, because it's a fairly new magazine. So it just needs,
good point. I should have. So print is not dead. Point is though is that there is room. Obviously print is not the way that people get their news nowadays. But as far as if you want to read good in-depth well-crafted stories and information, Mustang Hub is actually a really good magazine to do that. And it's it kind of the editor of Mustang Hub is the former editor of Muscle Mustangs. Really good guy. Henry De Los Santos is fantastic. He's fantastic to work with, but also he gets it in his. So it's a great. The pictures are always great in that magazine. It uses good paper. I don't know even how much it is to subscribe a year. It's like maybe $25 or something. I mean, it's insignificant. It's well worth the amount of money. And so there's a lot of good stuff that we have in there. And I contribute a lot to the magazine because I believe in it. And it's a great outlet to really share some in-depth information with people, including like this deep dive on the Mustang GT4 that we're going to do. It's, I think I talked to Henry about it. And I think he's going to set aside like 12 pages for this, which it needs it because I talk about tons of stuff. I talk to Ford people. I talk to people who race them. I talk about all the details of it. I go through a lot of the information that you don't normally get because a lot of people don't know about the Mustang GT4. So it's quite a piece of kit.
What's nice about them is they're an independent magazine, so they can say, hey, we want to do 12 pages on this. Do you know when that's coming out? So people, by the way, I put a link in the comments to Mustang Hub, so you can click on there. It's just mustanghub.com if you don't.
Yeah, I should have.
Yeah,
I should have had one handy. Sorry, but yeah, I got a whole.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering if you know when it's coming out, or is it already been published?
So it should be I think it's going to be in the fall issue. It could get shifted a little bit because it was a big chunk and I just gave it to him a few weeks ago, and he said he'll put it in he was going to put it in the issue that he was working on, which one is due in my mailbox any day now. It's not making it in that one. So it's going to be the next one. I think it's the fall issue. They have 4 issues a year. Wish they would have more because we have more stuff that we want to share in there, but maybe that'll happen eventually. But I think it's going to be the fall issue this year, which should come out in like September or August. Maybe it's the winter issue. I can't remember. Anyway, one's going to come in my mailbox any day. It's not that one. It'll be the one that's 3 months later. So but yeah, it should be in that one.
So definitely that's worth subscribing. If you have quality people writing stories like Wes, and his photography will be in there. So that's awesome. Okay, our next question here is, and if you have any questions for Wes, remember he's kind of an S197 guru and, obviously
Nerd.
Fox guru. What? Nerd, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are a little bit nerdy. So that's not a bad thing. So the next question is for Ford starters this is in response to something you mentioned. It says Ford starters don't need shimming like the others, so the bolt struggle thing is worth it.
Fair point. That's a good point. I didn't thought about that. But yeah, you're talking about basically you get your gear mesh. You can't screw up the gear mesh because the bolts are there. The bolts are essentially dowels to locate it. So that's fair. Yeah, that's fine. But you know what I'm saying though, like getting that top bolt, it's such a pain. I tell you what though, having a K member, like a Kenny Brown front K member, you can see the bolts, which is helpful. And then number 2, you can use extensions and swivels, like swivel sockets, which I have right here. Like these kind of things, like a swivel socket right here. That helps because it's low profile. And then you use a big extension, which I also have long extension. That helps get to those bolts. But yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I didn't thought about that. So I learn something new every day. But so I guess I'll still swear at it, but I just won't swear as loudly.
That's good. Okay, I'm going to go through some of these comments. A lot of people are buying your book.
Great.
Yeah, so anyway.
Operators are standing by. Sharpie.
That's good.
Yeah, book. Thank you, Joe. I just saw you popped up.
Yeah, so Cliff Glynn says, very cool presentation. I'm just reading some of the comments for you. Wes, thank you. Really appreciate it. Brian West, good presentation. Let's see. Another, I can't.
And we can get into some stories as well, too. I kind of have some stuff to share and go back to a presentation for about that. Maybe another 15 minutes or so. But okay,
yeah, let's do that. Here's another one. Bill Wellman says, thank you for the awesome presentation. I will be getting the book. Great book. I have an early S197 with a 4.63 valve. I got it for the suspension stuff. And we have another question in here I'll read it when I get there. Let's see. You just bought the book. Joe Johnson, and then we also have Brian West purchased the book earlier this week, probably when he learned about it. Wes, can you talk about the pros and cons of the different types of superchargers? That's like almost a subject in itself. Is that a come back?
Yeah, but you know what? It's a good point. And actually, just real quickly on the comment about the early S197 car. Yeah, 3-valve cars are cool. I mean, you can actually. I kind of wish I had a 3-valve car because you can put those. There's camshaft options that are kind of cool. There's an intake manifold that I don't know if Ford still offers for that car anymore, but you can find it. So there's some cool stuff that you can do to a 3-valve. It's just you're starting from a disadvantage, and you're never really going to make the kind of power that you do with the Coyote, but that's fine because you don't really need all that much power. There's people who race. That's called the American. What's it called? Spec Iron that NASA does, and those are S197 Mustangs. And there's very little that you have to do to those cars to make them a good track car. Make plenty of power. The way a friend of mine described who works at Ford, he said it's like a it's like a Spec Miata, but with a way better soundtrack, and it uses a lot more gas. But on the supercharger thing, pros and cons. I like from experience. I've never had a turbo V8 car. I do have a Focus ST, and I have to say, I'm sure a lot of it's tuning, but I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the power delivery of turbos as far as drivability on the street, because I kind of feel like it doesn't have. I'm kind of playing seesaw with the throttle. So let's set turbo aside for a moment because that's a little bit of a different animal. But a centrifugal blower, I didn't have a centrifugal blower on an S197, but I had one on a Fox that I really, really liked. And what was cool about that is I think a centrifugal blower works really well for a car for a motor that has a lot of torque. And so a pushrod Fox has tons of torque, totally runs out of breath at 4,000. I mean, the party is over at 4,000 RPM. It just lays over. So a centrifugal blower will make more power as the engine spins faster. And so it actually fills that. So here you have the torque from the torque from the pushrod motor, and then it just kind of goes and game over. But the Vortec or something, or a centrifugal, Vortec Paxton Pro Charger, builds power on the top end. So it actually fills in the hole perfectly. And it made for an engine that has a lot of torque, that's tuned for torque, the centrifugal blower is awesome. They're a little bit less weight, I would say, too. Installation wise, it's about the same amount of complexity. But now then, for example, in the book, we put a roots blower on it. So it was an Edelbrock. It's really heavy, really well designed. And also there's a lot of room to grow there. I feel, put it this way, Ford doesn't put centrifugal blowers on cars and doesn't put turbos on V8s. Not sure exactly why I've always wanted to ask that question, but I think essentially from having like this car that's perpetually in a state of undress over here, I have an 03 Cobra. I have to say a roots blower is like it's just like the engine's bigger. It has more power all the time. It's not soft. It has plenty of torque down low, and it just keeps pulling. So, and we look at the GT500s that's Ford's done. They're all that kind of blower, and I think that's because I think it's just it's a more straightforward, foolproof way to make power. May not be the most efficient, but it's like you just took the engine and just turned it up to 11. So, I don't know. It just depends on what you want to do for both. Honestly, I would say if you have an S197, a Coyote car, and you're doing want to do track work, you can make a lot of power naturally aspirated. 400 wheel horsepower or in excess of 400 wheel horsepower is a lot of power. Maybe I'm a wimp, but I mean, to me, I don't really want more power than that on the road. We put the Edelbrock blower on that white car for the book, and it was fast. It was really fast. The kids loved it, but it was really fast. I mean, almost stupid fast. More than you can really use. And in a track day, you're going to have heat soak. We didn't do a lot of track work on that car, so I don't know. But I mean, in general, you're going to have heat soak. I think heat is just going to be, something you're just going to have to expect. And I'm not knocking it. It's just that's just what's going to happen. It generates a lot of heat. And so naturally, I would stick with the naturally aspirated combination for just a dedicated track car. But if you want to have fun on the street and blow the tires off at will, a roots blower is going to be the way to do it. Centrifugal blower is also good. It's a little bit less weight. It's probably a high, you could say it's, if you wanted to have supercharged power, but a little bit less weight up front, then like a Vortec or a Pro Charger is another good way to do it. But on the Vortec and Pro Charger, packaging is also a bit of an issue in an S197. It's not as elegant as like on the old pushrod cars, where the blower was just off on the side and then just fed right into the intake. Here, you have intercooler stuff, and then the blower's over here, and then on a Pro Charger, it sucks hot air from above the headers, which I've never really been a fan of. Vortec is a little bit different, but it's convoluted. So anyway, hope that kind of answers the question. It's a matter of what you like. It's choose what you like, honestly. But naturally aspirated is not a bad option either.
Kenny always loved naturally aspirated. He did a lot of superchargers, root style superchargers, what he preferred. But yeah, naturally aspirated on the track is awesome. Here's another question for you, Wes. It's not really a question, but I'm going to let you solidify the answer for this. In your how to modify your S197 11 to 14, does it apply to the S197 05 to 12 or to 10? So,
does it? Was it?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Was?
Yeah, does it apply?
Yeah, so basically, there's all this table of content stuff, all of it does, except for the motor. So the motor and the PCM tuning will be different. But other than that, we talk about the history of stuff. A little bit of Mustang history, which is cool. Just gives a lot of background actually on the Coyote engine and why it makes more power than earlier ones. A lot of information in here. I talked with an engineer who was involved in the very genesis of the engine, and a lot of cool stuff that nobody ever really considered before. So, put it this way, if you have an earlier generation, 80% of this stuff is going to apply to you, and even all the theory stuff is still going to be the same, even on like roll centers and weight transfer and brake kit stuff and all that is that all applies. So honestly, it's technically narrowed down to those year models because of the engine stuff that's in it, but the rest of it all applies. But yeah, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about some of the stories and stuff, I think people might appreciate.
Sure.
For especially with Paul and all that, but it's up to you if there's any other pertinent questions.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions. I think one more. Let's see. Oh, there's more. I think people will probably hang on and listen to your stories too. I know, unless you want to throw a story and then we'll go back to questions.
No, it's fine. We have a couple more questions. It's up to you.
Yeah. So below this, we had Michael from London, who says a cold air intake is a very popular Mustang road modification. The GT4 balance of performance uses the standard OEM airbox and filter. Are the road modders wasting their time and money with cold air inlets and cone filters? Which my answer is going to be yes, but I'd like to hear your take on that.
Actually, that's a really good question. Well, and the answer is complicated. So the GT4 uses a 2011 to 14 intake on it, manifold, intake manifold. And that's because they said it's just cheaper and it made the power targets. You have to understand, for a Mustang GT4, power production, all power production was not the goal. For the Mustang GT4, good torque and a broad power band was the goal. So the point is make as much power early and make that power all the way to 88,000, 8,200 RPM. And it does. It makes the same power. It's just like a shelf. It's not peak power. It's the same power. And the intake manifold they use is the 2011 14, which is crazy because it has GT40 or GT350 cylinder heads, has GT350 cams, all this stuff. But that being said, if you're looking for maximum power production, looking at the Mustang GT4 is really shouldn't be your yardstick, because they have different priorities, and their priority was good power production. The point is, if you make too much power, the series is just going to scale you back anyway. And they run I can't remember now. I think it's like a 55 millimeter restrictor, and they use air restrictors right ahead of the throttle body to adjust power. So unrestricted, it probably makes really good power, but restricted, it's got to suck through a 55 millimeter hole. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's pretty small. So the factory airbox is plenty of power, or plenty of airflow for a 55 millimeter restrictor. And actually, one of the things that one of the engineers mentioned was that he found actually the inlet where the grill is, where the air comes through the grill. You know, when you get your airbox in there, it's kind of hard to get that thing adjusted and set up where it gets into the scoop that feeds it from the grill. He said actually that can be actually a restriction right there. I think maybe his context was more if you don't get it fit right. It's got to fit in there right, because if it's not fitting there right, that's going to be a restriction. But they use that factory airbox. That being said, are there gains to be in by changing to a different airbox? Probably. There's really no gains in throttle bodies. In my view, juice is not worth the squeeze as far as changing a throttle body, because you change a whole bunch of predicted airflow adjustments and things like that, and it messes with the computer. The computer wants to know how much airflow it's going to move with a certain throttle angle, and if it's flowing more, that's not what it's not what it was counting on, and it can cause issues. So if you run a forward larger throttle body, they have all that figured out, but you can't just do that by the seat of your pants and adjust that anyway. But the point is, there are advantages in going to probably a larger cold air intake and that kind of stuff. That being said, it helps to tune, using the HP Tuner software, tune the mass airflow sensor to that adjusted the larger flow. The reason you have to do it is because the mass airflow sensor will measure flow, but the point is that if the tube is larger, the sensor is only still measuring what it thinks is flow through a smaller tube, and so its estimates are going to be off. You're going to get more in there, but it's going to have an error as far as there's only a certain window of error that the computer will allow before it raises a flag, and it does a check engine light, and you have to go in limp home mode or something until it thinks something's wrong. So you can go to a larger tube without tuning the computer, but you can only go so large until there's an issue. But you can go much larger if you want, if you tune the mass airflow sensor, which I cover in the book. So anyway, but larger cone air filters and all that kind of stuff, not necessarily a waste. It's going to be minimal. You're going to want to do some other tuning as well. But the biggest gains really are in, well, I guess in tuning, but also exhaust work. And then really in different intake manifold. We did a Cobra Jet intake manifold, which was also good, made good power. So I hope that answers that question, but it's kind of, it depends. But point is, don't look at the Mustang GT4 as the epitome of power, because that wasn't the goal.
That's a really good answer, Wes.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to take just a quick break here, because I know we're like after the 1 hour mark, and now you can see why we did not play Kenny Brown video, because Wes has a wealth of knowledge that he's sharing, and he has a ton of really cool stories. So I want to let you know we're going to continue on. So if you have to break and leave, make sure you come back and watch the rest of it. It's going to be worthwhile. I also want to let you know, again, if you've just joined us lately, Wes has written a book on how to build and modify your S197 Mustang for 2011 to 14 S197. So we are selling on our website, and you get a discount through the Cars and Coffee, and the discount code is CNC Book. So in other words, Cars and Coffee Books, CNC Books. So make sure you purchase it. You'll get it for $29.95, and the big bonus, not the discount necessarily, but the big bonus is Wes will autograph it for you. So make sure you go on the kennybrown.com website and order that book. It's well worth it. A lot of people have purchased it and are just blown away with it. Okay, let's get back to a couple questions. Wes, you're still good to hang on with us?
I was born ready.
Okay, good. So let's see, Bill, we still have questions coming in, Wes, so we're going to answer those first. Bill, thoughts on V6 models?
Oh, V6. I thought you said B6. I was like, are we talking about like Alpina B6 BMWs? Anyway, there's actually some stuff in here about V6 models. So chassis stuff all applies. We talk a little bit more in theory. I didn't use a V6 model to do any of this stuff, but yeah, I mean, the engine, there was two different ones that were used in there. I think there's a 3.7 and then
4 liter.
4 liter. Oh, is that what it was? Okay. Yeah. And I can't remember the difference between the two, but when some of them came in, but actually they make good power. I mean, it's it's plenty fine. In fact, you could probably make, a decent amount of power. You can sadly make the same amount of power as you can with a 3 valve with a V6 pretty easily. That's kind of part of the reason why they wanted to do the Coyotes. Like our V6s are going to make as much power as that 3-valve did. So anyway, yeah, V6 are good. The balance will be good. All the chassis stuff's the same. Brakes, you can outbrake everybody because it's lighter. So yeah, it's another good option. V6s are great. To me, I'm a V8 guy because I'm particular about sound. And so to me, a V8 is going to make the sound I want and give me the soundtrack I want. To me, that's with a car, I'll tolerate a lot if the sound is awesome. I'll tolerate a lot.
So here's another. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, another question Jorge has, this is an easy answer because they're completely different cars. What are some of the improvements that will fit in a Fox and SN95 from the S197? So again, those are completely different cars, different suspensions, I think it's probably nothing, but what is your thought?
Yeah, there's I mean, as far as bolts and stuff, there's really nothing. Because they are completely different. That's where the Fox and SN95 are very similar, and so they all had the same advantages and also all the same problems. But S197 is completely different. Coyote swaps are even pretty. It's not as easy as you think it's going to be. That kind of stuff. Hopefully, some suspension parts that we currently do for S187 will be adapted for Fox and SN95 as well eventually. But working on that. But there's really not a whole lot. But a Fox and SN95 car, Foxes are not cheap anymore. SN95s are cheap though, and you can find them all day long, especially a 2-valve 4.6 car, cheap. As long as you find one that's not, you want one with as few owners as possible and as little miles as possible and no accidents, and you can find them pretty cheap. And those are really fun cars. They take a little bit more work to make work and drive predictably, but that's what Kenny Brown is for. So they have lots of stuff for that. But yeah, there's not a whole lot that translates between the two. And working on an S197 is just so much easier because it's just physically larger. The engine bay is just large enough that actually you can fit your hand down between the engine and the strut towers. Cobra, no way. Everything's difficult because they were packing 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag with the SN95 and the Fox. SN95 with a mod motor for sure. So anyway, but I still love them because those are my jam. But yeah, so I hope that answers the question a little bit.
So if you're enjoying Wes Duenkel, we've had to modify the Cars and Coffee format because Kenny's no longer with us. If you're enjoying Wes and you think of somebody else you'd like to hear interviewed or spend some time with on Cars and Coffee, please put that in the comments so we know, and we will contact those people. I know last week somebody wanted to hear something about transmissions, so we're working on that. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in at you. Brad, you want to ask the next question? If you're not ready, Brad, I can ask it.
Oh, so several people like Wes's 03 Cobra, by the way. There's a few comments on that. But Joe Johnson had a question. What are you thinking about installing 410 or 430 gears in a Shelby GT350 or S550 GT, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. Gear-wise, you know what? I kind of go against the grain on the philosophy of rear gears. That 85 Mustang I had, probably because I didn't know how to change them, but I had 273 gears in that car. I changed to 355s, and in the quarter mile, I really didn't pick up that much because I was traction limited regardless. You're shifting more in the quarter mile with 355 gears versus 273s. So if you have slicks, different ball game, right? You're going to have more mechanical advantage on those slicks and you're going to be able to use them more. But as far as if you're traction limited, you're going to spin in first gear, whether you have 273s or you have 355s, it doesn't matter. I'm not a big, maybe because I don't have a lot of experience with steeper gears, but to me, you're going to lose mileage. You're going to lose drivability. One thing that rear gears will do if you have a shorter rear gear set is that it will bring all of the transmission ratios closer together. So it's going to make your transmission more of a short ratio box, close ratio box. That being said, the current transmissions are pretty much close ratio boxes anyway. So to me, 373 gears were in that S197 that I did for the book, and I also drove a performance pack S550 with 373 gears. And to me, in my mind, that is all the gear that car needs. Doesn't need anything more, because you're driving on the highway and you're spinning fast anyway. The gear ratios are close enough. You're going to just use more gas with 430 gears or 411 gears. And if you don't have the tire on there to take advantage of them, I mean, Mustang GT4 has 331s. Because also in fourth gear or sixth gear on the GT4 is top gear, and it's 1-to-1, and so it's like fourth gear in a normal gearbox, or whatever is 1-to-1, or like a MT82 is sometimes direct as 5 is fifth gear. So anyway, point is on a track or something like that, you don't want to necessarily be in overdrive anyway, because overdrive shouldn't really be a power gear. Some people drive it like a power gear and are at full throttle at high speed in overdrive, but really your goal with your rear gears should be full throttle, fourth gear, top speed in fourth gear. So whatever gear that takes to get that, usually a 355 is going to be what it is. 373 is even a bit too steep. It depends on your speed. But and also the more the closer your ratios are, the more you're shifting and you're wasting time shifting it. This is not a Honda. This is not a peaky power plant. It's not a BMW M3 with a 4-liter. This is a 5-liter or a 4.6. They have tons of torque. Use the torque. Third gear is going to be the gear you're in most of the time. Second gear for slow corners, third gear for most corners, fourth gear on the straightaways, and that's it. So I would avoid, for track use, I would leave the gears alone. 355s is good. 373s is more than enough.
So we have another question here. Actually, a comment. This is when I was referencing continuing on over 11 o'clock. So it says, I'm watching this while making banana pudding, so I have plenty of time. Thought that was good.
I understand.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah, Kenny would appreciate that because he was such a cook/chef. So that's great. Let's see. Bob Jones says, hey, want to know if I can stop by and visit with you, Cari? Bob, of course, anytime you're welcome. Anybody that wants to stop by the Kenny Brown facility, you're more than welcome to. Just give us a little heads up. But Bob, yes, just call me or text me and let me know when you're going to be by. I'd love to see you. So he is actually, Bob Jones was actually in the Speed Therapy Academy. And so, we just love those Speed Therapy Academy guys. Okay. Do we have any other questions, Brad, that I missed or you missed? I think we're good.
Yeah, we can do that. Talk about some stories. I'll share my screen again because I have some pictures to go along with those.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, you'll appreciate this stuff.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. Let me try the share screen. Share screen. Hang on.
While he's sharing the screen, I want to wish all of you a happy Father's Day and give Wes some thumbs up if you like what you're learning from him. I think this has been just wonderful. I knew it would be. He's just a great guy and has a wealth of knowledge. Okay, Wes, it looks like you have it up again, so I will add your screen.
Middle fingers are fine too. Just, but it is what it is.
That's good.
So this was just some. I got to do some cool stuff for 4.2. These that you may recognize if you have a GT350 poster. This was used for a poster, which is cool. This is another like 15 minutes and get it done kind of thing. This was something we did back in 2013. This is also was turned into a poster for GT500. So that was a neat photo. Yeah, the desert. Remember what I said about the desert island car? Like if I were on a tropical island and I only want one car, this is a close second to my current Cobra. But I still like to have a car with 3 pedals. That's Evan Smith right there, actually, Cari and Brad. Evan Smith was doing the driving for this burnout shot.
That's a great shot. Wow.
Yeah. This was back in Las Vegas. Anyway, this is also used for a poster too. Keith Weston, the guy who's was an engineer on the program, is driving the car there too. So one thing actually kind of cool, Mach 1, great car. This is Mach 1 in development. And so Ford used this and had me come out and do some photos of its development. And then, of course, when they did a drive with had customers come out and do a drive, it also flies. Mach 1 flies. Who knew? But anyway, Yeah, some cool Mach 1 stuff. Yeah, so if you go to the Ford website and I think of the Mustang page has Mach 1 photos. These are all photos that we did in May of 2020 in Detroit. Mustang 2 fans, I know you got to be out there. Just keep this in mind. People talk about the Mach-E and kind of mock the Mach-E. The Mustang 2 was also mocked quite a bit, but they sold the heck out of Mustang 2s. So anyway, some portraits. There's Mustang GT4. Something to talk about there. So Paul, obviously I knew Paul. Yeah. And Paul's one of those guys where he was a do-it-yourselfer, right? I mean, he was a racer. That's what I would put it as. There are people who like to race, and there are racers who eat, breathe, live it constantly. And it was whatever it was to get to the track. And so here he is in a hotel room. This was at Barber that weekend too. And he's like, I got to get the right patches on my suit. That's the point, And some people kind of don't take it seriously. He understood sponsors and he understood relationships, because that's the only way he would get to the track. And I mean, leveraging those relationships and sponsors, he would not burn a bridge. Even maybe when he should have burned a bridge, but I mean, he would never burn a bridge, because you never know when that person's, I mean, I don't think this was conscious. I think it was subconscious, but the point is, you'd always foster those relationships, and he knew people everywhere because he took the time to talk to the people, and share the passion of Mustangs. So that was interesting. Yeah. Budgets, always on a budget, right? So he was a prankster, but yeah, this is in mid Ohio, taking tires to be mounted or whatever. We didn't have golf cart or a tire rack, or a tire trailer. Who has a tire trailer? Just use a rental car. He's like, he said, hey, I got this. So he just threw all the tires on the rental car and we took it over to the tire busters. Man. Anyway, yeah, this is funny. So this is Paul here. I have to say, this is probably a really interesting story. So this is when I did my internship. I had no idea what sports car racing was, or at least I thought I figured out what it would be, but it was not what I expected. So professional sports car racing, I thought, well, this is a sports car racing team. I read, there's a book that was race car vehicle dynamics. And I bought that book before doing my internship, because I need to understand, how this roll centers work and how spring rates work and how weight transfer work, and how tires work and loading and camber and all this stuff. I need to know how to set up a car, because that's what we're going to talk about. Here I'm thinking, pro sports car racing, we're going to have scales. We're going to be checking alignments. We're going to be, making small adjustments to the chassis setup. My first race, I show up with Mike Tiedemann, who was at HP Motorsport, and met Paul there, who was there at practice. We met him after we went there Friday night, drove through the night to get there Saturday morning. And this is what I find Paul doing. So pro racing, I learned with Paul, was not about setting up the car and making small adjustments. It was about keeping motors together and keeping all the parts in the motor inside the motor and not coming outside of the motor. So probably one of the things, who knows? There were rumblings and grumblings about, who was building Paul's engines and whatever. But, it was one of those things where Paul had a relationship with his engine builder, and he would not, he was just loyal to him till the end.
Bill, wasn't it? Was it Bill?
I don't know. I'm not sure who it was, but I mean, anyway, and I don't know who it was. And I'm just speaking from what I remember. But some people were like, I'm not sure, but some people were like, you got to check it. Because if you keep blowing engines, you need to try a different engine builder. They were saying, and Paul's like, oh, whatever. Who knows? But regardless, it was about keeping engines together. So there was an engine that he broke in practice. Actually, I'll go back to this one because it's still about this, but he broke it in practice. And so they had another blown engine in the trailer. Well, we got two blown engines. There should be enough parts here to put one engine together. So we spent the whole night putting the engine together. And the problem was, one of the pistons was the pistons were really loose in the new motor's bores. Like 2 out of the 8 pistons were really loose. There was something up. The skirts were collapsed or something. And so Mike Tiedeman's like, well, I know how to fix this. This is old school stuff. He said, give me a center punch. So we took a center punch and made dimples in the skirts of the pistons that were loose, that had piston slap, or that where the skirts were collapsed. Because when you take a center punch and you punch that, the skirt, it'll mushroom up the material around it and actually, make it bigger in that area. So he's like, yeah, it's called knurling a piston. I guess it was a thing like back in the old engine building days, you could knurl a piston to like make it bigger. I'm like, okay. So anyway, threw it together, and sure enough, engine made a hell of a lot of noise, but it ran, and Paul went out and finished 5th in that race, I believe, at Mid-Ohio, and it was very, very, very different. I was like, okay, so this is what sports car racing's like, is just keeping stuff from breaking. So anyway, but
he was
also
an incredible racer, just incredible driver.
Yeah,
So,
he would drive. He would just drive the hell out of a car. And he'd make some. I remember, he'd make a couple chassis adjustments, maybe, but he wasn't super versed in it. It was just kind of like, I'm going to move the track bar up or down because I know when it does this, and that was about it. But I mean, I don't ever remember making suspension adjustments or anything. It was just, he was like, man, I just go and drive the car and drive the hell out of it, and and it is what it is. So that was something. And another thing too, there were always people around Paul because he was helping somebody. If we weren't working on his car, he was over there helping, like Walt Dethier here with this 93 car. He had a cylinder head problem or something, so we were pulling the heads off that thing too. And it was just because anybody had a problem. If they were a shade tree kind of guy, he wouldn't be over there with Pratt and Miller with the Cadillac team helping them out because they didn't need the help. But he understood the club racing guy coming out and trying to race in pro racing and making a go of it. And so, man, he helped everybody. There was always people around who were paddock together who were just the circus and everybody helping everybody. If he wasn't working on his car, he was working on somebody else's car. It had grease all up and down. So anyway, this is interesting. So I got my first speeding ticket in this vehicle. I was in Ohio, driving driving late at night, I think we're coming back from Trois Rivières, I think. Anyway, driving back to Omaha. And in Ohio, used to be, and I think it may be sometimes we were probably on I-80, and speed limits for cars was 65. Speed limit for trucks was 55. Well, I'm going along with traffic, maybe 66 miles an hour or something like that. Police pulls us over. Like, okay, great. So I drove this thing a little bit. Actually, I should probably take a step back. This is the first time I'm driving a big truck with air brakes or anything like that. We're going down the highway. Paul says, "Here, you drive." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You drive. I'm tired." I was like, "Okay." So he just says, "Here, you just grab the wheel and come on over." So we just did a hot swap or whatever on the highway, and I'm driving. I said, "What do I got to do if I stop?" He says, "Don't stop. Just keep going. It's fine. We got plenty of gas." I'm like, "Okay." So anyway, but yeah, then I was driving it later that trip, and Stinky Pinky was the car. Was the name of it, because you can see the front of it was red, but it was faded. So, and it was something wrong with the ejector pump too. So it was really rich. So that's why it was really stinky. So its name was called Stinky Pinky. But anyway, driving in Ohio middle night, this cop pulls me over, give him my license. He's like, "You don't have a CDL for this." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what's the problem?" Paul comes up. He says, "Oh yeah." He says, "Yeah, this is an RV. We don't need a CDL for this. I'll show you the registration papers." So the state trooper was less than pleased. So he goes back to his car and has us come out of the truck and all that stuff. And he's back in his car for a while. He comes back out. He says, "Yeah, okay, well, yeah, I guess you don't need a CDL for this because it's an RV, because it has a bathroom in it. But so then I'm going to give you a ticket for speeding anyway." So he gave me a ticket for speeding because I think he was kind of irritated that he thought he was going to get me for driving without a CDL, which should you have a commercial driver's license for driving a truck like this with air brakes and all that, and like a 2-speed rear end and all that? Absolutely. Did I need one? Did I have one? Absolutely not. So anyway, that was a learning experience. This is I've never driven anything like this. I never even driven a pickup truck. So anyway, that was a fun story.
That's cool. At some point, I'm going to share with you guys Kenny's stories of driving semis and stuff like that to racetracks. He's got a number of them that are really good. But go on.
Yeah, it's always an adventure. Yeah. So here's this car showing up at Road Atlanta just after building. It was a brand new car. Didn't really have a space for us. We were late as always, and we showed up a little bit late. But the point is, this car, World Challenge at the time was really overgrown street cars. This was really kind of a cross between a Trans Am car and a road car. And so when we showed up, everybody's like, "That doesn't belong in this. This is a Trans Am car." So it was kind of revolutionary at the time. It was pretty, pretty wild and crazy, but Paul would do whatever we needed to do to try to make it work. So then this is also this is Paul and Carol, but we worked on this car here. I think this was when it was called Willie, because it was also a pre-production car that they made a car for her. But anyway, it had a transmission that was always problematic. See, here's what I thought sports car racing would be, like adjusting tire pressures, but yeah, even with this, we were constantly messing with the transmission, trying to get it to work. But this was an interesting car. I did a couple weekends with them, but constantly messing with the transmission because it had this transmission from an Aston Martin. And so it was a T56, but it was robotically shifted. And problem was trying to get it to work because Carol was paralyzed. She couldn't use her legs, so she had to use hand controls to drive this thing. And so that's why it was automated manual transmission. And so the problem was all the instructions were in Italian because it was a Magneti Marelli, I think, system. So everything was in Italian. Making adjustments, never could figure it out. It turns out one of the problems we had was just that the shifter mechanism itself came loose from the top of the shifter on the tail shaft. But we'd never only figured that out later. But always tweaking with this thing, and it was all in Italian. So that was kind of a funny story. Oh, here's another one. So Paul had a great relationship with Vortec, and he always was super loyal to Vortec. So anyway, but the point is we had a Vortec on this car, and it sucked a bolt in or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but something nicked the impellers. And so here we are at Laguna. He's like, well, what do we do here? I guess we just need to file these impellers and file the nicks off the impeller. So here we are filing on a supercharger impeller. I wouldn't recommend this, but yeah, it was just something you just do what you got to do. I'm like, I got to get a picture of this. He says, well, I don't know if you want to take a picture. I said, I'm taking a picture. I don't care. So here we are. That's with the Vortec. One thing I did learn, really interesting in general on supercharger belts. So had a problem on this car where the belt was slipping all the time. No matter how tight we made the belt, it would slip. And because what would happen is it was a fixed tensioner. So you'll notice on every car that has a serpentine belt, the tensioners are spring loaded, and there's a reason for that. What would happen here is that a fixed tensioner, and even Vortec still does fixed tensioners on a lot of things, and I'm like, for high boost, that's just not going to work. The point is we had the belt super tight. Well, when it was super tight, it would heat up. When it would heat, it would slip. And when it would slip, it would heat up. When it would heat up, it would expand and slip more. So it just was a vicious cycle. Once you figured out, a spring-loaded tensioner situation, the belt was so loose you could just grab it with your hand, and you could move it around, and the tensioner would spring there, but it would never slip. It made the boost all the time because the spring-loaded tensioner kept the right tension on the belt, and it wouldn't slip and it wouldn't overheat. And it wasn't so tight that it was overheating right off the bat. So always, 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 if you can, make sure that your supercharger system has a spring-loaded tensioner somewhere in the blower belt system if you're running a lot of boost. The street stuff that Vortec does, they get by with just a street tensioner, no problem. But on a racing application where boost is important, especially road racing with heat soak and everything else shifts, and when the engine shifts too, the belt is going to slip because the engine's going to move a lot faster than the belt. Or then the supercharger has a lot of inertia, so the belt is going to slip when it shifts. So you just don't want all this tension in the belt so that it's really, overheating. So that was an interesting thing we learned. Yeah, typical. Power steering spilled on the exhaust. Yeah, I think this is most board or something that happened with Carol too. She was not excited about this. She's like, why is this burning? Anyway, so that was always an adventure. Always was an adventure. So, and I just want to end this last thing. So this is Road America. This is how I proposed to my wife. So that was this is 1999 also in that maroon Mustang. You could see him not taking the proper line because I'm trying to go slow enough to point out the sign that she failed to see. And I'm like, look over there. She's like, what? Texaco? I'm like, no, over to the right. She's like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm like, I was just crawling through there. I'm like, can you see this yet? She's like, what? I'm like, the sign. What sign? The one over there. Oh. Anyway, so.
Oh, that's a great way to propose. Sounds like it was better in your head than it was in reality.
Yeah, it was. It worked out fine, but and that bridge is no longer there now. They have a tunnel there. But yeah, so anyway,
that was
great.
Kind of a fun story. Road America is one of our favorite tracks. So let me bring us all back here. So here we go. So Wes, that was just excellent presentation and great stories, and I think everybody enjoyed that. So I just can't thank you enough for joining us. Sure. And if you guys would like more guests like this, just let us know who you'd like to have on our show, and we'll invite them on. So we look forward to our next adventure with Wes. So Wes is going to be doing a little bit more work with us. So we're excited about that as well. Brad, do you have any last minute points you want to say?
No, I don't think so. We had somebody that commented that they thought that the photo that Wes showed was from the Shelby Club event, maybe.
It is correct.
Yeah.
That would have been. They used to run it in September, so that would have been September, mid September sometime. Yeah, and that it actually kind of worked out well. Weather-wise, it's usually kind of iffy there because it could rain a lot. But yeah, that was always a highlight of my. Actually, yeah, things I learned. So I just used whatever I could find to make that car work. And I didn't really know a lot of what I was doing. But for example, brake ducts, I used dryer ducting, like the silver stuff you use for your dryer, because that's the only stuff I could find. It was in the hardware store. I'm like, well, this looks like what I need. So I do that because at the time, the internet really wasn't a thing at the time. It was a thing, but it wasn't like I knew where I should search for race car parts, right? I didn't know what race cars even used. Like I didn't know that they used silicone brake hose stuff. I didn't even know where to find that stuff. I would take, I would make panels for the car, like for brake ducts and stuff. I'd go to the hardware store and buy plexiglass and then heat it up with a torch and then melt it so that it would bend in the right place and then use that for my inlet for my brake duct thing. I mean, crazy stuff I do. Like, to move my air cleaner up, I wanted to move. I didn't have the money or didn't want to buy a thicker air cleaner. So what I did was I just found in the garage, there was a snowmobile belt that was the right diameter. So I put the snowmobile belt in the air cleaner housing, put the filter up higher on the snowmobile belt. It was like, really? I mean, nowadays I just cringe at that stuff because it was just, it was embarrassing but that's all. I didn't know how to do it the right way. I didn't know that there was a different way to do it. Never been around any race cars at the time. Never looked at any professionally prepared race cars. Never knew any of that stuff. Actually, if there's one book series to really read, it's the Carol Smith books, especially the one on I think it's a book, Nuts and Fasteners. And if you need to read that book because it is phenomenally informative. I learned a ton from that book, like what lock washers do and what lock nuts do and why you would want to use these lock nuts versus those lock nuts and what, how to drill a proper hole and clearance the hole right for the bolt and all this stuff. Really, really informative. That to me, the Carol Smith books were an eye-opening experience, especially the nuts and I think it's called Nuts, Bolts, and Fasteners or something. It sounds boring, but it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, Kenny, I really love the Carol Smith.
That's right.
As well. And actually, in the Speed Therapy Academy, one of our master classes, we invite an industry expert on fasteners. So, and it's just a really good class. You think, you like you said, you'd think it's boring, but it's fascinating. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I didn't get a chance to say it too, but obviously, I mean, we really all, and I miss Kenny a lot. I mean, he was really, he loved sharing his knowledge, and to me, that can't be overstated. I mean, he just loved to share what he learned, and he was always learning. To me, I appreciate that more than anything, as far as because a lot of people like to kind of keep things close to the vest. It's like, no, what's the point? I mean, we all learn together. And we all make mistakes, and it's good to learn from those mistakes. So I really miss him, but I really miss that especially. But I mean, I kind of share that passion too. So that's why I wanted to come on too and talk about sharing what we learn. We learn stuff, and there's a lot of times being kind of like from a mechanic standpoint, I just don't learn by doing it, so, and making mistakes and being like, oh, that didn't work. Maybe we should do it differently next time. Or why did it fail? That's another thing too. If a part fails, pay attention to what was going on when it failed, and then look at it in detail and be like, why did this crack here? There's a reason. Things happen for a reason. So you need to look and figure out why it happened. There are no such things as just freak accidents. It probably happened. It was probably happening a while before it happened. So like if a part breaks, it was breaking for a while, but you have to find out why it was breaking for a while. Anyway.
And that's a reason why Kenny always, one of his big things is before you go on track, And even if it's a street car, you need to maintain your car. You need to check those nuts and bolts. You need to look at everything before you're going on track. That's such an important part of, having a great weekend or a fun time. So yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
and don't. I also learned to don't put your toolbox in front of your car when you're parked in the paddock, because when you get in your car, you don't see it. Now I've run over my own toolbox twice. Twice. I know it's there. I see it there, but I get in the car and I run over it because I'm like, there's nothing in front of me. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, another thing too, actually, really important that I have learned too is don't put bolts in and leave them loose. If you put a bolt in, torque it, finish tightening it, because if you leave this loose and leave that loose, you're going to forget. Same thing with the hood. If you have hood pins, don't put the hood down without putting the pins in. Every time, if you have hood pins on it, put the hood down, put the pins in, even if it's going to be for 10 minutes. If the hood is down, the pins should be in. If the hood is up, fine, leave it up. But when you put it down, put the pins in. Race weekends, all the time, you'll see people with their hoods flown up, probably because they forgot to put the pins in and they didn't pay attention. So I always tell my kids, life skills, be a dad, do dad stuff. Dad stuff is like, I need to take my wallet, so I'm going to put my wallet on top of my keys so that I can't leave the house without my wallet because the keys are under my wallet and I'll still forget. But the point is, there's, like in safety, we learned there's engineered solutions and then there's administrative solutions. You can tell somebody, don't stick your hand in there, or you can make a guard so that their hand can't fit in there. You want to do the things that are foolproof. Telling people to do something or saying, I'll just remember to do that later. No, you won't remember. You won't remember. So don't trust it. So just like the bolts and everything else, just don't trust it. Don't leave it for chance. Anyway, talked all enough. Sorry.
Well, thank you. I think you talked without taking a sip of water too. That's impressive. So you have your water there? Oh, the coffee.
It's coffee.
That's why.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Great,
very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Wes. And if you want to purchase Wes's book, go to the kennybrown.com website for the discount. The discount code is CNC. Here, let's put Wes up. I'm going to put you up again, Wes. You can show that book. So the discount code is CNC book. In other words, Cars and Coffee book. And you'll get it for $29.95. But the most important part, again, is Wes will autograph it. So make sure you get that. And we really enjoyed you guys sticking it out with us. Of course, you enjoyed it because you're still here. Wes, you're a wonderful guest, and we appreciate it. And we'll have you back again sometime. And thank you for the kind words about Kenny. It means the world to me. So he is missed. So thank you guys, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. I think it's June 31st. Next week we'll have a Kenny Brown encore presentation, and then we will be sharing who our next guest is in the next week or so. So take care. Have a great Father's Day. Take care. Bye-bye.